In this edition of Fifth Gear, cannabis, how does it affect your driving? An attempt on the 0 to 60 world record. And the Model T Ford, still going strong.
Honda's Civic Type R, seriously sorted and leader of the hot hatch pack. 197 horsepower, 0 to 60 in just over 6 seconds, and a rather snazzy interior. At £16,000, it's also great value. Not to be outdone, Ford are hitting back with this, the Focus ST170. It's a successor to those Essex Essentials, the XR2 and 3. One of Ford's strengths has always been knowing how to tart up a car. They are the masters of the body kit. Usually. Things are a bit tame here. At the front there is a new mesh grille, some fogs with sexy xenon lamps and 17-inch alloys. And that's about it. Oh, apart from this teeny-weeny badge. Now, in case this ever comes up in a pub quiz, ST stands for Sports Technologies. Inside, they've razzed it up a bit. Metal on the pedals, silver trim on the gear knob and handbrake, and I am pleased to see on the dials a Millennium makeover. It starts at the same price as the Honda, but add in goodies like this car's metallic paint, those headlamps, Recaro seats, plus a souped-up stereo, and you'll end up paying an extra £2,000. Which makes the total bill 18 grand. Steep stuff. It had better impress them. 0 to 60 takes 7.9 seconds, though that is almost 2 seconds slower than the Civic's. Top speed is down to 134 compared to the Honda's 146. If you want more from your Ford, then there is a nutter Focus, the supersonic 220 brake horsepower RS, due later in the year. In the meantime, though, you'll have to make do with 170. And although this ST is very keen to show what it's got, it won't intimidate the Civic on a blast. But if you stop thinking about the ST170 as a Hooners car, then things get better. The bog-standard Focus is a highly competent cornering machine. And with the ST, the boys have tweaked the chassis and stiffened the suspension to splendid effect. There's plenty of traction and grip, even with the electronic stability program switched off. So Colin McRae-style jaunts into trees should be difficult to do. Unless, of course, you are Colin McRae. I do have two little criticisms, though. The first is the new 6-speed gearbox, which isn't as slick as the Honda's. And the second is that chassis. It's so good that the more you drive it, the more you can hear it begging for more power. So, is this fast-ish Focus going to woo Civic Type R buyers? The ST170 is a very good car, though in a refined and understated way. It's more business suit than tracksuit. Me, well, I like my cars to be a lot more edgy, more hardcore, so I would go for the Honda Civic Type R. It not only looks special, but it makes you feel it too. Better luck next time, eh?
The nation, it seems, is going to pot. 1 in 10 Brits use cannabis, half of 16 to 24-year-olds claim to have tried it, and the clamour to legalise grows ever more strident.
But rather than wring our hands over the decline and fall of society, we're going to be a bit more constructive. 18% of all road traffic fatalities show traces of illegal drugs, with cannabis by far and away the most common. That is a 6-fold rise in the last 15 years, and the reason why tonight we're going to see what happens when you mix dope and driving.
Cannabis is smoked either in leaf form or as a compressed resin, but you simply can't say it causes accidents. The effects last for a matter of hours, but traces stay in the bloodstream for up to 4 weeks, which is why it shows up in so many post-mortems.
2 years ago, the government commissioned research on cannabis and driving, but they used simulators instead of real cars, so the research was criticised. Nobody has ever physically put a cannabis user in a car and shown the results on British television. Until now.
Meet graphic designer Gavin Campbell, a regular user who's freely volunteered and brought along his own gear. He doesn't drive while stoned, but is as keen as we are to find out what happens when you do.
With the help of safety experts, we've devised 3 tests for Gavin to take on a private test track before and after smoking a joint. Now, we don't know what's going to happen, we haven't rehearsed this, so rather than retire to a safe distance, I'm going to go along for the ride.
As a benchmark, Gavin took the tests while perfectly straight. The first job was to stop safely at a white line. The second was a cheeky little slalom, and the third was parking in an imaginary garage, all done perfectly, although he did clip a cone at the end. Then Gavin smoked what he regarded as a typical strength spliff. Time for the moment of truth.
Just describe what's going on in your head now.
It's hard to describe, really. I don't know. I feel, yeah, lightheaded, relaxed, you know, at ease.
So how does being at ease affect Gavin's driving? The stopping test requires distance judgment, like slowing to a set of traffic lights.
Well, that looked pretty good to me. We're not sideways, we haven't locked up, and we've stopped more or less bang on where the white line is, so... OK, right.
On to the slalom test, which checks spatial awareness and medium-speed manoeuvring.
Did you find that hard?
Nope, not at all.
I can see no deterioration in your driving skills. Your gear changes are still very good. Your speed's constant. You're anticipating the way you handle the car seems absolutely fine. How do you think your driving is now?
I think it feels like I'm driving a lot slower, and I tend to be concentrating a bit more on what I'm doing.
Well, that's interesting because you're not driving slow. It's more or less the same speed, 25, 30 miles an hour. I can tell no real difference.
Our volunteers' performance was reflecting some of the findings of the government's official simulator tests.
OK. No problems there.
In the official tests, subjects were aware of their impairment and hence drove more cautiously, exactly the opposite effect of alcohol, which is said to promote risk-taking. And the garage test was passed with all cones in place.
It's hard to generalise, but you did a run when you were straight, which was worse than that. So how do you feel about that?
I feel good about that, yeah.
Was it easier, more difficult, the same?
Probably more difficult, because I had to concentrate more. I mean, there would be cars either side, so
Yeah.
you know, I really don't want to hit any cars.
If it was more difficult, why did you do almost better then than you did before you'd had your...
It's paranoia crossed with concentration, you know. You're paranoid of what might happen, so you concentrate more on what you're doing.
We took a step nearer to real life by throwing in a bit of distracting traffic. Gavin followed it safely and competently. We couldn't catch him out, even with an emergency stop. There's always a variance of effect depending on the person, but after that one spliff and in our controlled environment, there was no obvious impairment to Gavin's driving. The police equivalent of a breathalyzer for drugs is a test that involves touching your nose and walking in a straight line. These Americans aren't faring very well. After his one spliff, Gavin passed these tests, but it might have been different if he'd smoked more. So where's the limit? Is there a safe amount of cannabis you can smoke before driving?
Now, I know there are thousands of you at home advocating zero tolerance, and that any trace of weed, pot, blow, black, resin, bush, smoke, ganja, call it what you will, should be considered a very serious offence. But hang on a minute.
Unlike booze, cannabis is illegal, so there's no official dope driving limit. Like the breathalyzer, we need to find a testing system to establish how much cannabis it takes before your driving goes to pot.
While we're as surprised as you are at the results of today's tests, I'm emphatically not condoning drugs and driving or saying that this was remotely scientific or empirical. It wasn't. What I am saying, though, is that we need to put away the old stereotypes and cliches about hippies and reefer madness and get down to an intelligent, informed debate about drugs and driving, and we need to do that as soon as possible.
A car's 0 to 60 time is the sort of currency that reputations are built on. It takes your average family saloon about 10 seconds and your average supercar about 5.
But the Guinness World Record for a production car that's legal to drive on the road is an almost inconceivable 3.07 seconds. And that was set back in 1994 by a rally-bred Ford RS200. So it's about time someone tried to beat it.
The problem is, what with? You need four-wheel drive, low weight and plenty of power. You need a £40,000 Tiger Z-100.
Yet another innovative testimony to Colin Chapman's original Lotus 7. And what makes this special is that it's got one Kawasaki 1200cc engine to power the front wheels and another to power the rear.
Which results in 408 horsepower wrapped in 650 kilos and a power-to-weight ratio that dwarfs everything else on the road. So what sort of multi-million-pound operation conceived this potential record breaker? Well, meet the Dudleys.
I'm James Dudley, I'm the Managing Director of Tiger Cars.
My name's Sue, I'm Jim's wife and I do the day-to-day running of the business.
I'm Jo, I'm Jim's daughter and I like to put them through their paces.
Hi, I'm Laura, I'm Jim's daughter and I deal with all Tiger's money.
Hi, I'm Chris and I'm responsible for the design.
The Tiger may have twin engines, but it's half the comfort and twice the vibration.
Now, it may seem very complicated, but it's actually very simple. The gear lever is split into two, so I can either change one engine at a time, or both together. And I've got two red counters that shows me what each engine's doing. Mind you, it doesn't really matter what gear it's in, because if you floor the throttle, the performance is
And the handling experience is equally energetic.
If we're going to break any records, though, we need a few basic ingredients.
You literally need a level playing field. Check. Some witnesses.
Check.
Some state-of-the-art timing equipment.
Check.
And a driver who knows his clutch from his elbow.
Check.
The fastest way to accelerate from a standstill to 60 is by swapping the spectacular for the efficient. Smoking hooliganism is not what's required. Instead, you need a delicate throttle touch and exquisite clutch control. Earlier trials had proved the car was capable of a fast time, but to even stand a chance of sneaking under that record of 3.07 seconds, absolutely everything needs to be perfect. For starters, you need the right weather. A wet track would make it impossible. And you need just enough fuel to keep the weight to a minimum. But eventually it's left to man and machine. Everything felt good, and in the frenzy I just kept the throttle planted. Now it was the agonising wait to see if we'd beaten that magic time of 3.07 seconds. It took just a second to get to 20 miles an hour and under 2 to get to 40, so things were looking promising. 2.35 to 50 and...
2.97.
Oh! We'd beaten it by a tenth of a second.
We're fast now, out of the way. I'm getting the knack of this. One record broken, I'll go and set another one.
Well, I would have if I hadn't broken one of the engines first. A rod had gone through the side, and that was that. But it doesn't stop us believing that this little car is capable of even more in the future.
There aren't many cars as significant as the Ford Model T. At one point, they made up half the cars in the world, with one rolling off the production line every 10 seconds. They used to come in any colour you liked, as long as it was black, because that was the fastest drying paint. They did 45 miles an hour, 20 miles per gallon, were simple, strong, and could even drive through trees. Overall, nearly 17 million were made.
Right, you got all that? Good. Now, if you were thinking, as I indeed was hoping, oh, come back foot, that meeting the world's biggest expert on Model Ts would involve a nice trip to Detroit, you'd be wrong. Apparently, he's around here. Somewhere.
Because here at the back of a muddy, windswept Buckinghamshire farm lies not just a muddy, windswept Buckinghamshire farmer, but Neil Tuckett, an extraordinary enthusiast. He buys, sells, restores, repairs and collects them. Nothing happens in the world of Model Ts without him knowing about it first.
Rod, can you bring me another timer?
So how do you, in the middle of England, come across all this Model T, I was going to call it junk, but spare parts?
Some of it was produced here because they had a big factory in Manchester, but the majority comes from America, and people ring me up, fax me, email me. So the stuff finds me. I don't have to go and hunt it out particularly. And I round stuff up once a year in America, go over there and fill a container up and bring it back.
If I was to buy a Model T off you, Neil, what sort of people would I be ranking myself alongside? Who's been here as well?
I've got a sheikh in Qatar who comes over regularly to buy Model Ts, and the owner of the racetrack in Malaysia, he came over and bought two. So yeah, you never know who's going to come in.
Well, if they're good enough for Malaysian racetrack owners, they're good enough for any of us. Time to get to know the T a bit better.
You could say that the Model T was the world's first multi-purpose vehicle. The chassis stayed completely the same throughout production, but there were 17 different body styles, and you can find most of them right here in Neil's yard. Blimey, Neil, look at all these.
You could spend hours looking round Neil's stock. He's got everything from unusual Model T tractors to desirable four-seaters, even charabancs that transported troops to the front. This wooden creation was a people carrier for the 1920s. Lose the seats and the roof, and it doubles as a flatbed pickup. This is one of the rarest, a right-hand drive town car worth £25,000. As time wore on, I felt I was becoming quite an expert and could value almost anything.
This one looks like a cheap one, Neil. Why don't you put it out of its misery? Look at it.
This is one of my favourites. The kids call this one Rusty.
Oh, no, it's rusty. It's a death trap.
Yeah, no, it's not a death trap. It's MOT'd every year. I drive this 1,000 miles a year.
Have you got a bit of a thing going on with the local MOT?
No, he doesn't give me any favours.
So out of all these, this one is your favourite?
I'll jump in this one every time.
And this was how much?
I bought it in a sale, looking derelict for £2,999.
Hang on, what do you mean, looking derelict? Look, for how much?
It had £2,999. It had straw, chicken's nest, fag packets.
And you paid three grand for it?
No, £2,999.
Yeah, you're a deal, I can tell. Well, how much is it worth now that you've done it up?
Well, I basically just serviced it and put new tyres on it, and I maintain it, and I was offered £9,000 for it and turned it down.
You should have bitten the hand off.
No, I enjoy driving this car.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm glad. I'm glad to see you're into it, Neil. I really am. I'm just thinking of your car, Neil.
Having established there was a T for all tastes, it was time to actually get to grips with the thing. Although that wasn't going to be quite as straightforward as I'd imagined.
No, we won't give it. Right, Neil's given me the lowdown on how to drive this car, and we'll start with the accelerator, which is a lever up here, which is crackers. Down here, this is where it gets confusing. There's first gear down like that, and up into top. This middle one is reverse, and this one is brake. And apparently, if you get into problems, you just press all three at once. I've only got 2 feet. Anyway, can't be that confusing to start it with this button down here. Come on! done. Yes, a natural. Off we go. Oh, more revs. Oh,
This 1925 Tourer is worth around £9,500. It's not exactly nippy, and I'm not totally convinced the steering's up to modern standards, but it does come with the desirable factory-fitted option of a windscreen wiper.
I better slow down because I don't trust myself or the steering. I'm actually coming to quite like the charms of the T. I've got to watch out, we're picking up speed here. And there are plenty of people in the UK who are also into it. The problem is, there aren't enough youngsters getting into Model Ts in order to perpetuate the legend.
Which is where Ford's Build a Model T challenge could come in. It celebrates Ford's centenary, and Neil will sell you everything you need to build a winning car of your own. But if you're worried a normal T is a bit pedestrian, then get yourself a 90-mile-an-hour speedster version and scare yourself silly.
These days, it's hard being an American. There are queues of people trying to blow down the embassy doors, which is why the US Army have come up with this, the Smart Truck, for those with a rather more stressful commute than most. Based on a Ford F350, it's packed with $1 million worth of kit to protect special forces, embassy staff, and even presidents. Revolting fundamentalists are swiftly dispatched Uncle Sam style.
Engaging pepper spray. Activate.
God bless America, and woe betide anybody who doesn't agree. No, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Once on the move, any motorcycling assassins can be thwarted by rather useful bulletproof bodywork, which seems to be reinforced with mattresses.
Engaging smoke screen. Activate.
Wouldn't mind doing a couple of laps around the M25 with this.
Engaging oil slick. Activate silent running mode.
And who needs boring old headlights when you've got night vision to spot terrorists? In their 2 CVs?
Warning.
They've got lamps like these on the White House lawn, so they must be good. Anyway, having safely immobilized yet more assailants and used the handy 4-wheel steering, it's time to press on. Oh, and in case you're wondering, this isn't a celluloid Hollywood fantasy. The Americans really have built it and filmed this road test to promote it. We were told that the Smart Truck is apparently only 10% lethal. I bet you could hurt yourself on that grenade launcher, though.
Laser turret.
Eagle 6, this is Black 6. We've just crossed through the Mojave Pass en route to your location.
Smart Truck sales will be restricted to the military and friendly foreign governments. I bet old Tony would love one. And all this before we've even got to the options list.